Good evening. This is Maestro Cortello with a Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite modcast. Today, we have a 1v1 on Greentooth Gorge. Our first player is Troillet, playing as the Orc Mekboy. This is a teleporting Orc ranged hero. He also has some spells for disruption and support. His opponent is Noisy, playing as the Imperial Guard Inquisitor. This is a debuffing and... yeah, I forgot what my other word I used to describe it was. Disabling and debuffing commander, who can also be a melee tank. Alright then, so this is the final game in a 5-game series between Troillet, or also known as Toilailee, and Noisy. The finals of Monthly Rumble Tournament number 13. We did see Troillet took the first game with his Apothecary, then Noisy won the two next games, and Troillet switched to the Mekboy and was able to win the 4th game to stay in this series. Not sure who's going to win, but we do see Noisy's aggressive play again. He added in his Inquisitor all the way up to challenge all of Troillet's units, pretty much all of his squads, right in front of their power farm. And he's using that to gain a VP advantage. He was able to distract all of these units right in front of their power farm, and he was able to get a lead in VPs. He actually captured the contested VP before he even had his own natural, and now he's actually even managing to hold on to the contested VP just by having the presence of his guardsmen as well as the sentinel in the middle, denying an attempted decap by Troillet's shooter boys. Mekboy in the building. Wow, so we see Greentooth Gorge, which actually does have a few buildings. Garrisons usually do not come into play that much in Dawn of War 2 just because there are so many maps that don't even have them, but they can be potentially pretty powerful on maps that do, since the amount of damage resistance you get inside a garrison is huge, although you're also very vulnerable to anti-garrison weapons once they are purchased. So we see Noisy preferring the VP pressure. He actually has slightly worse resource map control than Troillet. Troillet having captured this contested power farm or power node over here, while Noisy does not have this one on this side. He's also getting forced off in his attempts to pressure Troillet, but he's also keeping Troillet more in his base, and he's increasing his VP lead. Although we see Troillet's about to... oh, is he? He's actually idling with his Mekboy. I'm sure the intention right here was to get the decap, and unfortunately he's going to miss that opportunity because we see the Sentinel. However, he's going to keep the Sentinel, or rather the Mekboy in this tower, and now he will be able to get the decap. And actually, I would say this is actually the least amount of VP pressure, early VP pressure that Noisy has been able to apply, but he has started every single one of these games with a lead in VPs and with the intention of putting on early VP pressure and putting his opponent at a VP deficit. Troillet, meanwhile, going for pretty much the same build that he went for last game, double shooter boys, as well as a Luda, giving him ranged firepower, a lot of ranged firepower, especially with the Mekboy as well, which is going to be very threatening to the Sentinel, as well as, well, pretty much anything else. So we see and we're seeing some pretty typical plays here from Noisy. He was able to use the artillery spotters to disrupt the Ludas, and that clears the way for the Inquisitor to approach. And her goal is to tie up the Ludas in melee. It doesn't look like it's really going to happen right here, so instead she moves back, and that means it's time for Troilailee to turn back around. A lot of miles dying on that shooter squad, though. Pretty close call, I would say, on that shooter squad. 2 models at about 80 hit points as a squad overall. So now the VPs are actually looking pretty even, which is, I actually feel like, not a good sign for Noisy, considering this is the least VP advantage he's had in all games so far. And there are certain games in this series that he had won with that VP advantage, as well as games that he lost with that VP advantage. Sentinel prowling around. Sentinel right now is definitely going to be very, very strong against the Sluggas. The Sluggas going to bleed models very, very quickly to that Sentinel, while not really being able to do anything about it. And Troillet's also moving around very much as a blob, or, well, mostly with his units together. They are somewhat separated. The the Shooter Boys, I was just going to say about to get disrupted, but rather than get disrupted, they got blinded, so they're just moving forward. Slugger Boy's pushing forward. Slugger Boy's actually in a huge amount of trouble, walking right into that Holy Pyre. That Holy Pyre debuffs. It also does a little bit of damage. The damage it does is fairly low, but it stays active for a pretty long time. This is actually now not looking good for... Oh no! We saw a Stomp on Retreat, potentially going to finish off this Shooter Boy squad. Stomp on Retreat from the Sentinel is actually very, very effective for finishing off units in retreat. Relatively speaking, it's one of the tools that Imperial Guard has, and now we actually have a Flamer Guardsman squad, which is usually one of the nice things about going for a triple Guardsman build. You can actually afford to go for a Flamer Guardsman squad, and you still have 2 more squads of Guardsmen that you can leave to be plasma guns if you wish. Although plasma guns not necessary in this matchup, you would just want to keep them as las guns so that they have maximum range. Alright, this is actually... Oh no, that was such a good artillery spotter shell with how it knocked those Shooter Boys forward. And this is actually now looking like a pretty commanding lead for Noisy. Even though I was saying his VP pressure didn't look as strong, but I feel like right now him choosing to get the Flamer and actually take control of Troillet's power is looking really, really bad for Troillet. Troillet actually going to tier 2. But he doesn't look like he necessarily has that big of a lead in resources, and he definitely doesn't have the lead in income anymore. Certainly not as far as power goes, although both of these players have a very strong requisition income. I still don't know how this game will go. I do know that it's actually not a very long game. So far, it looks like Noisy is looking a little stronger. Stomp is going to hurt very, very bad. And Noisy actually about to take a triple cap. So he might actually be taking a quick lead, but he's also... Noisy is also getting forced off. Troillet should be able to get his double cap back fairly soon, but now he's also... What's not looking good for Troillet is that he's spreading out his army to capture points back up. It doesn't matter too much as long as Noisy is back in his base, but, I mean, he just has units spread apart, which is going to reduce their effectiveness for fighting. With any luck, they should be able to get the caps they need quickly enough, although I don't think so. I think they'll mostly just be able to get decaps when they need it. We have Slugger Boys going out with 3 models to get the natural back, so overall I do not feel too confident for Troillet at the moment. He is getting a Weird Boy. Let's see what he can do. He just has the Ludas hanging out here to protect the contested VP. He is putting on a lot of VP pressure, but he's so split up, has to be very, very careful. I think this squad of Shooter Boys that just finished capping is going to want to regroup with the other one that just finished capping. They're about to run into a shell, so he moves away so that they don't get knocked back. They still get knocked back a little bit, and they're engaging not really on the greatest terms for them. And I do not forecast a win for the Shooter Boys in this engagement. Yeah, and we had the support rolling in for both the... Oh no, and this Shooter Boy squad in potentially a lot of trouble. The Sentinel might chase after it. Can it finish it off? It can. And that's terrible for Troillet. Troillet, oh, and he lost his Mekboy as well. Alright, not looking too good. Looks like it might be, Game 5 might be going in favor of Noisy to finish out the set and win the tournament. This has, of course, already happened, but... Well, I still don't know what's going to happen, but it certainly looks like it's going to go in favor of Noisy. Weird Boy putting in some work, though. Definitely going to do a lot of damage to Guardsmen, even attempting to force melee. The Weird Boy does not do a whole lot of damage in melee. He actually does very little. Although he does have a melee special attack, which you hardly ever see, because the Weird Boy is not actually good at melee, and you usually don't want him in that situation. Most of the time, if he's in melee, it's actually a really bad situation for him. Weird Boy taking some shots now. If the Weird Boy is not good at something, he's actually not very good against the Sentinel. He won't do that much damage to the Sentinel. And the Sentinel can definitely move around to avoid his shots as well. So things are actually now looking pretty dire for Troillet. The Inquisitor, he even sees that the Inquisitor is getting around the firing arc of the Luda, and he just starts moving them back, but that means he's giving up ground. He's actually giving up all VPs at the moment. and his resources are looking very, very thin. He has a dead Mekboy, and he's getting chased back into his base. This is also time. Oh man, this combination of the Holy Pyre into the assail is just absolutely deadly against the Sluggo Boys. They nearly died from that. And I mean, part of what Noisy was just doing there is just, again, just keeping Troillet in his base, pushing him back, not even letting him out of his base to move back out onto the field. And that's buying Noisy more time to get more VPs in his favor. It's a triple cap. Noisy's actually going to tier 3, and I don't think we've even seen him go to tier 3 in any of these games before. And I mean, what's often said by a lot of high-level players is that Imperial Guard usually does not make it to tier 3 in 1v1, or they don't always. And I mean, in this case, if Noisy is making it to tier 3, that must mean he's at a pretty significant advantage. Or did he cancel tier 3 and now he's going for Ogrins? Yes, he did. So, Toilailee or Troillet isn't quite out of this yet, but his Weird Boy is at pretty low health. He's finally got the Mekboy back, and the Mekboy is teleporting around. Looks like he might be trying to capture Requisition, which seems desperate. I mean, he does need the resources. Stick Bomb's actually trying to finish off the Sentinel, and the Sentinel did not even move, just straight up stood there and took it. And now we actually see the Inquisitorial Mandate from the Inquisitor. And this is potentially also a tanky build for her, since she becomes invulnerable while the Mandate is active. She also becomes faster. It can actually be a very useful war gear. It's not straight up better than the Rosarius, which, I mean, explains why in other games Noisy actually got the Rosarius, but it can also be very powerful and has similar uses. It does make her more tanky, but it's a time-bound ability rather than an energy-bound ability. Pretty much once the invulnerability wears off, she's no longer really that tanky, and she's just draining energy from her health. And you can of course only have either one. But wow, attempt to finish off the Sentinel with the Mekboy. He's gonna lose the Mekboy because of it, though, I think. Yes, he is. That's gotta be it in favor of Noisy, and yeah, Troillet finally does call the GG. So the winner of Monthly Rumble Tournament 13 turns out to be Noisy. So obviously that last game was relatively short, but this was some high-level stuff. Great players, great games. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a good night.